right. Well, welcome to another episode of the Rogue Lawyer Podcast. Today is a little bit different. Today we are not talking about law, politics, or any number of things. We're talking about content that's relatable to lawyers in terms of how much they enjoy their job, why so many seem so unhappy, and just the state of the profession. And blessed to have Moira Kirk here. She's a former lawyer turned psychotherapist who helps lawyers across Canada deal with this distress, dissatisfaction, all of the stuff that goes along with being a lawyer or helping them overcome these things. One of the reasons why I wanted to bring Moira on is I see in the profession tons of lawyers who are essentially putting on a front of happiness, but I can tell inside are kind of dying. And I'm interested in knowing how we can help lawyers love their job. And so I thought, who better to bring on than somebody who is a therapist and kind of coach for lawyers who are struggling. So welcome to the podcast, Moira.
Thank you, Phil. Happy to be here.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be in this job that I imagine most people think is kind of fascinating?
Well, I was a lawyer for about 10 years. I worked in Toronto, doing estate litigation primarily. And I liked it. I liked parts of it. But when things happened in my private life, there was it's overwhelmingly stressful. There becomes an issue with addiction, anxiety. I quit to get some, personal recovery. And then I decided I should go into mental health so I can help other lawyers who are going through that.
So you left law.
Yes, I quit one day, sort of impulsively.
Kind of like Jerry Maguire, you just like grabbed your goldfish and said, "We're out of here." Or?
Well, I just knew I couldn't continue. Yeah, things were not going well for me at the time, so I just decided, I'm gonna focus on my mental health. I thought at first maybe I would open up my own practice, things like that, but I just I needed to give it a real break. Mm-hmm. To step away from it, to learn, focus on sobriety, recovery, mental health, all that.
I became a lawyer as a second career.
Right, yeah.
I haven't been in the military, and I think that gave me a bit of an advantage in terms of dealing with the stress. Like everything about law, from my perspective, from application to first day at law school is about scarcity, right? It's very hard to get in. As soon as you get in, it's about, I need to get a job in the first summer or else I'm not successful.
Right.
And it just, from day one, it starts in this, what I call scarcity festival, in which you never really feel comfortable.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I had been trained to deal with stress and that stuff. So I was able to kind of see through this. And I started something called the Mature Students Club at my law school, which was designed to help these professionals who were freaking out about law school. And I'm like, but a lot of people go into law school are like hyper-performing students.
Yes.
Who are driven by a goal and haven't really had tons of experience in terms of building positive relationships with other people.
Right.
So I remember being in law school trying to talk people down from the cliff saying, hey, look, we're supposed to learn here. We're supposed to be agents of change in society, stop stressing. But no matter what I said, it was very hard to get people to stop stressing. How in your job do you help lawyers who are stressing?
Well, we always try to do sort of the basic coping skills of learning how to take deep breaths, journal, yoga, spending time on yourself. But ultimately, it comes down to bigger questions. Are you happy where you are? Or do you need to make a change? Mm-hmm. It depends on the person if they're not satisfied with the kind of work they're doing or maybe the culture of the firm that they're in. It gets complicated, so it's personal to everyone, but...
What I found is, in terms of career guidance, the pack goes where they think they need to go in law.
Right,
and they spend,
big law.
they spend so little time in introspection. I remember in first year, everybody's like, I want to do human rights law or criminal law. But then the institution, I think because it's funded mostly by big law, sets these criteria that you can't make it. And so everybody is always judging each other by who got what job, who's doing this, who's doing that. And I've found having high functioning humans who are so focused on performance created a very negative culture, even though people were all polite to each other.
Yeah.
And that kind of dissonance between people are acting polite, but you can tell they really don't care.
Oh, they want you. Yeah. They are going for blood.
Yeah, and to me, that's what creates this stress, because there's dissonance. people are being polite, but then people are really not in your corner, not supportive. And there's just very little introspection. And when you say deep breathing, like that would even be amazing to have a class in first year law on mindfulness.
Yeah.
You know, because to me, you were training warriors. When you make lawyers, you're making warriors who wield power not through weapons, but through the legal system. But there's very little focus on mindfulness and knowing how to deal with stress and being happy. So I guess I'm interested. To me, I kind of see you as, I guess you're not, but it's kind of funny to imagine you as that therapist from Billions. Did you watch Billions?
No, but I should.
Have you heard of it?
Yes.
So you got to watch that show because that hedge fund essentially brings in a psychotherapist whose job is to keep the kind of sociopathic hard workers on mission.
Right.
Right. So she actually has an office right around all. I think like law firms could get that.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, like an EAP. Like
but without it being just to tell them to work harder, but to actually help your people survive the high stress environment.
Yeah. So CBT would be really good for that. Like trying to say basic, which some people find invalidating, but CBT works on your thoughts, right? So what are your thoughts that you're having about this situation? Maybe you're showing up every day to work saying, I hate this job
Mm-hmm.
sucks, it's too hard, whatever, I can't do it.
Yeah.
You know, and so talking about changing those thoughts that you're having. Whereas other modalities do it differently.
What's CBT?
Cognitive behavioral therapy. It's sort of like the most popular kind, I guess. And it works on the basis that like the thoughts that you think create the emotions that you're having and are related to the behaviors that you put out there. So
Before you came on, I did a bit of research, and it looked, from what I could tell, that close to 30% of lawyers suffer from depression.
yeah, it's high.
Are you aware of how that benchmarks in the rest of society or any of that stuff?
I'm not sure exactly on the numbers, but it's definitely overrepresented. It's one of the highest professions in terms of like anxiety, depression, and addiction, for sure.
Addiction, yeah. The article I read said that they're less happy than dentists, which I think is saying something when you have to stick your hand in somebody's mouth all day long, that they're less happy. But the the addictions issue is interesting. Where do you think that stems from the lifestyle of the firm or from the stress of the job?
Of course, everyone's different, but for me personally, my experience is that, you know, you are constantly on call, you're thinking about your files all the time, so your brain just won't quiet itself, right? So that's where the mindfulness comes in. But when you are busy and you're not thinking of mindfulness, you're reaching for a drink is like an easy way to just turn it off, you know,
numb it.
and it's so effective. That's why it's such a desirable, easy to fall into habit, right, of drinking a little bit at the end of each day to relax, but it becomes a problem quickly.
I've experienced that in the military, in business, and in law, and the social pressures too.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah,
Like
the
it's
cocktail receptions and
it's always there. The games, the cocktails, the drink, and it becomes like your status is like, I'm getting a martini, or I'm getting this, or I'm getting that. But what are you seeing these days in terms of the biggest issues that lawyers are struggling from?
People talk about work-life balance a lot, obviously, so they struggle with turning it off. They struggle trying to shut it down for the night, trying to have boundaries, like saying, you know, I have to make time for fun. Like they struggle with having any sort of personal life, fun, you know, making time for that stuff. That stuff just falls to the wayside. And then they realize it's been a year since they've enjoyed anything, you know. It's difficult to prioritize things that seem less important. But so that's one of the main issues, that they just keep working despite the...
Tell me if this resonates with you, but law school has a couple of effects. Like it can teach you to work incredibly hard through incredibly complex materials to provide interesting answers to problems, which I think is I see law school as kind of like a black belt in logical thinking or in thinking, right? The kind of more nefarious element that I see law schools is it's kind of a credential machine that forms powerful brains into kind of workaholics who don't question authority or hierarchy.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? And so it's actually like you're actually going into this kind of puppy mill of law school to be trained to just work ridiculously hard, to never be satisfied, to always feel insecure. And then a big firm will bring you in, the big firms who are funding a lot of the law firms will bring you in and then just work you like a dog. And you're just constantly feeling behind and never good enough.
Yeah, big law has a very unique sort of way of functioning for sure. And it does convince us all. I sort of talk about it a bit like being under the spell, of big law, right? Like deciding, maybe you went to law school wanting to help people, wanting to do something different, but you end up being drawn in by the salaries, by the wining and dining, by the just,
The
everyone's,
lifestyle.
yeah, just the glitz of it. And you're convinced, and then you get convinced that, if you don't get that job or if you don't make that money, that you've failed, right? And this is like, you've already like proven yourself, but as you were saying, right, you're consistently trying to prove yourself again and again and again, and it doesn't slow down.
It's that carrot in front, like it's never good enough.
Right.
Like, and the businesses profit off of that.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. But I don't think it's working hard necessarily that makes people unhappy. It's like the lack of meaning behind the work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the key things that drove me to like say no was I realized one day I said, I'm just helping people get a little bit more money. It wasn't like, I'm not saving lives. I'm not, so why am I stressing myself to the point of burnout just for a little bit of more money for other people? It wasn't the meaningful kind of work that I envisioned. And maybe that's a little bit spoiled in a way, right? Maybe we go to law school thinking we're special, we're smarter than the average student, so we have like these expectations of ourselves to do great things, and then we end up, doing mundane sort of litigation or whatever it is. And these are important files. Of course, they're important for every client. They care about them. But at the end of the day, if you're not doing things that is meaningful for you, it does kind of feel...
Yeah, I think a lot of lawyers kind of get railroaded into an area and they just kind of take, I didn't get this job, so I'll take this next level prestige job, rather than having the kind of courage to say, hey, this is what actually matters to me. And maybe I'm not going to have a corner office and a parking spot, but I'm going to change the world in a little way. I wanted to share with you the story I was in Toronto with my partner, and there was these two lawyers, female lawyers. One worked at Faskin's, one worked at Stikeman, I think. And they weren't partners yet, but they were about 5 years in. And they were like very well put together professionals, having some drinks, and they didn't know I was a lawyer. It was like a collection of people from a community. And they just went on this rant about how much they hate their job. And they're like, look, 5 years, we don't meet clients.
Yeah.
Right? We have billing targets that are designed just to try to extract as much money out of a corporate client as possible. We know we're not really providing that much value. We want to provide value.
Yes.
It's fairly toxic in there, although we do get, Leafs tickets and Raptors tickets, and they were both like, and then one of the other women at the table said, well, so do you like your job? They go, no, we hate our job. They had no idea I had a law firm. And so I asked them, like, well, where are you from? I said to the first lady. And she goes, I'm from this rural town. And I'm like, you're doing corporate work and mergers. And I'm like, why don't you go to that town, open up a shop, and change the lives of the people in that neighborhood? Become like this person in town that everybody knows about. Everybody waves to you. You're helping. And the look of disgust from the two of them. And she goes, what? I would never be that type of lawyer.
Yeah.
And I'm like, do you understand that you're like orchestrating your own misery?
Yes.
Because you have this fake level of prestige, and you don't understand that it's better to be loved by hundreds of clients you meet every day than to be sitting in a tower, that has caviar at lunch or whatever. But, it's funny how they couldn't reconcile, as smart as they are, that they're miserable because of this unreasonable expectation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I see that over and over again with my clients too, right? Like what I was telling you about being under the spell, right? Just believing in this sort of myth of like prestige and success and what it means to be a successful lawyer. And it's always, climbing higher and higher. And so that's an exhausting treadmill to be on.
And the money, but the way they described it, they weren't doing work that was really meaningful.
Right.
Right? They weren't really even meeting with clients. But for some reason, their progression through the legal education system made them think that being a smaller, medium-sized town business lawyer helping them was so far beneath them. You know, and I find that humanity is missing in law. Like, how do you fix that?
Well, I think you can talk to, I mean, when I talk to my clients and when they realize something's off, when they realize that they have that moment of like, okay, this is not working, we can talk about like, okay, opening your own practice or doing something alternative. Or if you kind of like the big law environment, there's nothing wrong with staying there, but you have to adjust yourself to the environment, right? There's no way, like you can't make much change in big law,
No.
right? That's not good. That's not realistic. People can say all they want that they should be change makers and things, but you know, so you have to adjust your own expectations. That's where things like CPT come in. Like, are you willing to change your mind and change your attitude, or are you not willing to change yourself and therefore you got to change your environment? Those are your two options, right? But like I remember when I went to started at Osgood Hall, and I was in first year with a nice young man, and he was telling me he's from a small town, and because we were talking about OCIs or whatever, all sorts of stuff, and he said, I'm from Fergus, Ontario. I'm going back to Fergus, Ontario, and I'm going to open up my own shop, and that's my plan. I don't even care about all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I was so impressed. I was honestly so impressed. To this day, I think about him, because like to not fall into that mindset is it's very impressive, and it's hard to do.
I've asked a couple of law schools if I could come, because I used to teach leadership, if I can come give like a little talk on perspective.
Yeah.
And it's kind of welcome, but always shut down, because they enjoy having the control over you.
Yeah.
Like the control over the grades, the control, like it's a very power dynamic in law school. And they don't really, I think like the best law school would be one that like teaches the first years that, you know, they're in charge of their own educational pathway, that they don't have to do this or that, like empowers them to make better decisions. And I think I know there's some professors and deans who watch my podcast from time to time. I'm like, you really failed your students. You know, you thought your job was to perpetuate the system because the legal profession is so honored, but you're not really helping the people who come in get to where they should go to make the biggest impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? It's almost like if there's any aspiring lawyers or young lawyers, like they should talk to somebody like you early, because it's very hard to undo it. Like those two ladies I talked to in Toronto, I can't break their version of the world.
Yeah, no,
But
it's difficult.
if that young man that you were talking about, or like if you had more of those conversations in first year, you'd think you could help lower the kind of the mental health issues that lawyers have. But what annoys me is that law schools are all about this kind of virtue signaling now about all of this stuff, but they really don't come down and protect, you know, the people in the law school by giving them the tools to challenge what's expected. Like, I don't know what would you say? When is the average lawyer who sees you, when are they coming to you in their career?
It's a variety. So some are just newly in a big law firm, and then others are more into their private practice. But I would say that I noticed the biggest sort of drop in enthusiasm to be around the 4 or 5 year mark, for sure. There's just a plummet. I don't know what it is exactly, but you know, by the time that they've been in it for 4 years, they are okay, they've got the idea of what's going to happen, and they're maybe tired, maybe they're waiting to make partner or not. But
that partner element is interesting, because I often thought that big firm had like a deliberate model where they make people fight for a job. They come in and then they put them on a hamster wheel, and they just spin them to bill as much as possible under the promise of partnership.
yeah.
And you're competing against the smartest people, like if you're in the big firms. So all you can do is work harder, because everybody is brilliant at that point.
Yeah.
And then the irony, and I think this happened a lot to females as well, is the partners are often the people who bring in business.
Right.
But these are people who have social lives,
Yes.
right? Like
Yes.
the rainmakers and the people who bring in business are the people who are not just obsessed with
Law.
doing what you're
Yeah.
supposed to do. Right? So you have these people who dedicate everything, they bust their butt, they're working, and then they see somebody else make partner because they can bring in business through family connections.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And now they're sitting there at the 4th or 5th year, usually around 30, saying, look, I've sacrificed my personal life. I've been busting my ass. It doesn't look like I could even ever take time to have children if I wanted them, based on this path, or you can't think about it until you make partner, and then that's where this kind of sadness comes in.
Yeah, I've talked about that myself, and I was just talking about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a 2-year-old now, and I'm 44. Like, it's
cool.
right. Like, you put these things off because you're working so hard. But it's true. And a lot of us don't have like the family connections, right?
No.
We're first gen lawyers, so we don't know about any of that. We just come into
and
it so naive.
I think the system loves that. Like the system wants these intelligent people to come in because they do this big chunk of the work, right? But the system is rigged and nobody tells them about that. And if you do, you get in trouble. And I was thinking, I often help people scale their businesses. Like I do some business coaching. Something you could do that could help people is to create like a kind of a short online course that you can kind of try and get like an email list or whatever it is for first year law students.
Okay.
Like, and if you could kind of publish on Instagram, do some posts. Look, if you're in law school, here is a course that costs $89 that you can do online that will help inoculate you against all of the pitfalls of a legal career.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
That would be amazing. And you could probably sell, you can even give some people in law school like a commission to sell it. Like if you find somebody in there, right? Or a couple of profs who are sympathetic. But I think you could affect huge change by giving people this early. Mm-hmm. And then I think from a business perspective, they'll know you're the person to help them there. So later in life, they'll always go back to you.
It's a great idea.
Right?
Thank
and
you,
then
Phil.
I think it also satisfies a little bit of what makes law so troubling is that regardless of how smart you are, you're always selling time. Mm-hmm. So you don't really see a window where you can relax because you just got to put in more hours. But products like that, you can make money when you're sleeping.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I think that when we talk about like why is law so hard? Why do people hate it? The billable hours, the selling your time thing comes up a lot. But when you think about it, like most people who have an average job, right? They that's what they do. They sell their time. They get paid by the hour. So it's not just the being paid by the hour that it's the issue. Mm-hmm. It's more like it's more the pressure to keep doing the hours, not beyond just a regular 9 to 5. But
well, I've encountered that with doctors that I've helped. When I talk to doctors who are millionaires in their 60s, what they tell me is, for the first 10 to 15 years of my life, I drove a Jetta. Yeah. And I worked my ass off. Right? But doctors who come out today, well, they want a Mercedes and a beautiful house in the Hamptons, like right away. Yeah. And so it's that expectation of you have to be wealthy right away, which then drives, I have to work harder, which then you have the thief of comparison, which makes you unhappy. And so all of this just makes people constantly striving and never happy, as opposed to saying, I just got out of law school, I got to work 10 years, and then I can have the wealth that comes with law, right? Like they don't want to do that investment. They think, I'm smart. My parents paid me to do well on the LSAT through some tutorials. I got the right summaries, and now I should just be rich. And like, you're not going to be happy. You're going to be miserable, and it's going to turn you into a miserable person. Right. And I just see that in law all the time, that there's this veneer of courtesy, but they're really like not kind, good people. Like, well,
I think that you're hitting on a point about expectations, right? So, not understanding that law means 10 years, 15 years, 20 years of very hard work in order to get to that point where you can just kind of relax a little bit. That's a long time, especially in this sort of current state of the world. Like, we don't think that long anymore, right? No. We used to think careers were 40 years at the same firm, right? But people don't think that way anymore. You're right. They want the results
because everybody is borrowing and flexing. And I was reading an interesting article that the reason why the 50s, regardless of the politics, were one of the happiest times is success was a decent house with one car, and there wasn't like this visible thing on social media that showed yachts, that showed bottle service, that showed all of this all the time, right? People in their neighborhoods said, okay, like I'm doing well. Yeah. Right? And so they were happy. But like once you have this kind of comparison is the thief of happiness thing, where you're constantly seeing who's doing more, who's traveling more, like I had to learn to like stop striving to win everything. Yeah. Especially when I came out of the military. And like I lament for the profession because nobody seems to be talking about it honestly.
Right.
Right. And I thought when I left the military that law would be way more positive. That was fairly inelegant how I said it, but I found law was like way worse than the military in terms of hierarchy and people screaming at people.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to describe it, but definitely the hierarchy thing. Like I noticed that as soon as I left my job, and I was working in a really nice firm. Like it was not by any means this kind of toxic environment, but still, I said I'm never having a boss again because I just felt the hierarchy thing so strongly, and I'm a very sensitive person, so I pick up on that, and I just like really leaned into it too much, I think personally, and I can see that happening with other people too. It's weird.
Well,
because it's not the army, but you do like end up, yes, sir, anything you want.
No,
like just tell me what to do. I'll do everything.
Terrifying. Like it's when I think of it, how dysfunctional it is. But really, what lawyers, they were just becoming mercenaries for powerful interests. So you had to actually be hierarchical.
Yes.
Because you're just told do this for this big company.
Right.
Well, that doesn't seem right. Well, then you're out. You're fired if you say that, right?
Yeah,
It's like you have to show that you do it more. But how do you? I think we're talking more about the profession than individuals, but what I saw is the patterns. I find people want to make people go through what they went through.
Yes.
And so it's very hard to break the pattern.
Yes.
And me being in special forces units, they don't really act like that. Like it's very hard to get in, and you actually have to prove your character, your stamina, your integrity. But once you're in, people are kind to each other. Like when you're proven.
Yeah.
But I find like in this legal world, it's similar with judges. Like when the judge was a lawyer, he got yelled at every day in motions court. So he or she thinks, now I'm a judge, I have to yell at people and like humiliate them.
Right.
Because that's part of it. Like, but that's not the best way to learn, to be humiliated.
Right. The standard of like being perfect, and then if you're not perfect, you should get yelled at for sure. Is the difference.
And because it was done to you,
Them,
you have to do it to the next person, and you can't break this cycle of just making people always feel humiliated if they make a mistake. And one of the things I'd love to teach the legal profession is the zero fault mentality in the military destroyed operational effectiveness. So if people made a mistake and they were fired, like people then just would do everything not to make a mistake.
Right.
Rather than if you get away with the zero fault mentality, if you say, look, if you tried hard, acted with character, and you made a mistake, we can learn from it. Right? We don't need to humiliate you. You don't need to be screamed at. And the legal profession doesn't have a lot of people who are interested in learning moments. They're interested in like nothing I hate more than a judge or a motions master, even a justice of the peace, trying to show how brilliant they are by yelling at a student. Like it offends me to the core. But I've stood up for students sometimes in court where they're getting yelled at.
Yeah.
And the judge is like, who the hell do you think you are? I'm like, I'm just somebody standing up for a student who doesn't know what's going on here, and you're yelling at him. And like I've had judges want to kill me, but like I just don't care. Like how do we change this system?
It's a big ask. How do you change culture? Like it's huge, right? It's so ingrained in the legal community. I do think that people are nice, but when they're put into that sort of toxic environment, let's say during articling where it's like 10 students, they may like each other, but it's still competitive amongst them. They know that, right? On some level.
It's situated conflict. It's designed to make them undercut each other.
Yeah.
And they actually pick the one. It's like 10 rats in a maze, like you pick the rat that kills the other ones. Like it's that's why I say there's this veneer of courtesy, but the actual system is designed to have them stab each other in the back almost to get that job.
It's hard for people who are kind, who want to actually help out other people, or, take time out of their day to do something helpful for their students and for their co-students. And then they're shocked when they get, left behind.
That's why I think the product I'm talking about you doing probably has one of the highest amounts of impact. If you can make a cool online course, that's kind of like, here's an inoculation for people getting into the legal profession.
Right.
Told to you straight, without filter.
Yeah.
This is what you're gonna face.
Yeah.
This type of dog eat dog world, this type of force you down this pathway. The one way to protect yourself, vaccinate yourself. from that is to understand that you have to control your own destiny. You don't have, you know, like you could take them through some courses and stories. And I think that's the way, if we can get new cadres of lawyers coming up, not feeling terrified of saying no to certain things. There's always going to be big firms who work hard for that, but I think we can move talent away from them into other practices for their own happiness, and it actually probably improves small towns.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I remember sort of learning about and after articling, after that whole process, is that, you know, a lot of law firms will hire articling students and they know exactly like what practice groups are hiring, but they don't tell them.
No.
That's just like one of the like kind of awful tricks that we're doing to students, right? Where of course you don't want to tell them, because then they won't want to work. Only that practice group will get any students trying to work for them, right? But
because they're cheap labor.
Yeah, so
they need to know that.
They should know that.
And the law school isn't telling them that.
Yes.
Right? And their peers aren't telling them that.
Yeah, go find out who's hiring.
Yeah.
Go find out, like, you know, go behind the scenes, ask questions, like stuff like that. It's just, it's sort of, and then when you do realize it, you feel just demoralized. You feel like lied
betrayed,
to. Yes.
Lied to. Why am I doing, like, there's all of these factors working to make good people in the profession depressed.
Yeah.
Right? I think the kind of borderline sociopathic A-types, they're not really happy, but they don't care because they're more focused on, that's what makes them sociopathic, is that they'll just work for the reward, and they might not be happy, but they don't care because they have a different metric of success. Yeah. But the profession is almost set up to disproportionately hurt the good people. Like the kind people, the good people, who are just as smart and hardworking, but the system slowly suffocates you.
Yeah.
It's like you come from Osgood, one of the top pedigree law schools in the country. Have you ever reached out to them and said, hey, can I come in and give like a quick talk to first years?
I haven't done that yet, but I know like people I work with have done that, or were actually counselors there. So it is an option for sure.
Do they have counselors at Osgood?
They have some. Like
I think you go like at
support.
Western, where I went, you go through the main campus.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right, to do, if you want it, you can use the benefits for.
Yeah, I think they have it now. Not in my day. Just those 20 years ago.
You should offer virtue. Like, I think law firms should have some sort of, I don't want to call it mental health support. I want to call it, like, you know, because that sounds bad. Like, I think it should be like personal development kind of coaching in law school early. Yeah. Like, to help them get ready for what's going to happen, because unmet expectations are particularly devastating. Yes. You're like, okay, I got into law school. My family is proud of me. Like, I can tell people I'm going to be a lawyer, and that gives you that little bump. Yes. But then the slow kind of path of when you realize that the system is just barbaric in many ways, and because they had this expectation it was going to be different.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, these days they're taking on huge debt usually. Everyone knows there's a big shame sort of thing where, you know, like the fear of failing in the public, like that people, they know I'm a lawyer. Everyone in my family knows, everyone that I went to school with knows that they became a lawyer. So this fear of failure is huge too, right? It's another aspect. It's just such a constant anxiety in the back of your head. You can make one bad mistake away from potentially getting fired and losing your job, and everyone hates you. Like it's a lot of stress.
There's parallels with doctors. When I was a Crown attorney doing some white collar crime, the profession that is defrauded the most are doctors in Canada. Yeah. And it's because they come out with debt. Yeah. And they're expected to be a rich doctor right away. Right. And so, but they're on a salary. So they just spend too much. And then when somebody comes up and says, hey, look, give me 50 grand, I can turn that into 750. They're so desperate to get that luxury jump quickly that they get defrauded, and then they never report it because they're embarrassed. Like, it's interesting that these people who are in the considered intelligent professions are so susceptible to corruption at some level because they can't get off that treadmill.
As a woman, I think I was a little bit like sheltered from the need for that. I don't know. I think men probably face it a little bit more with like the need to have like the fancy car and the nice home. I didn't feel that, so I think it was easier for me to sort of say this is not working for my mental health. But I can understand why someone who's sort of on that path of like, oh, I've got to be like the guy with the best car, the, person with the nice house. Why there's be so much pressure to stay in a job where maybe that's not right for you.
Yeah. Think about what you're saying. Like control is fundamental to some happiness, but when you're constantly behind the eight ball, constantly having to perform, you actually, even though you look like you have everything, you have very little control over your life.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Right? How would you tell lawyers who feel like that? Like, what are some tips you can give them, lawyers who are struggling, or from your experience, like if this gets shared, like how would you inspire a lawyer to?
Well, I mean, it again depends on where that person is in their career and what kind of practice they're in. So if they are in a company that is like, I would say put yourself out there, like ask for what you want. You don't get the thing if you don't ask for it. So let's say you are in a company that you can't really change the company, but let's say you want to change something about the way you practice in a firm, like talk to the right people, make sure that they know what you want, make sure that they know, that you're interested in this kind of work or you want to be put on that kind of file if you can, if that's a possibility. If you're thinking of starting your own practice, that's a completely different world where you have way more control. And then it's about, well, make sure that you're not just taking on every client that walks in the door. Make sure that you're not overextending yourself because you just want to do everything, right? Like I've talked to some lawyers that I think are really inspiring because and they say that, they're very picky about their clients. They don't take on everything that walks in the door. They reject a lot of clients and they only work their certain out. Like they have very strict policies for how they handle themselves. And I think that those kinds of lawyers will do the best in terms of their mental health, right?
They might not make as much money as fast as they want to, but in the end, they'll make more money because
they can stick it out longer,
yeah.
right?
And they don't have complications or lawsuits and generally the best files are the files where the person values what you can bring to them, not the ones who are looking for deals or all that stuff. One thing when I talk to, it's interesting when you say ask for a file or to do something. Sometimes when I help people, I'm like, you have no power if the person you're negotiating with doesn't honestly believe that you could leave, right? It's true in relationships, right? Like if somebody takes for granted that you're never leaving, it doesn't matter how much noise you make, you're never going to have the power. And the same is in law. So like if you want to make a demand, you have to be prepared to leave the lifestyle. You got to take the hit for 2 years and then you can build something else. But if you're not willing to do that, you're going to be a slave to the organization paying you.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. But it's terrifying to do that when you have obligations and all that stuff. So
again, back to, if you have dependents, if you have aging parents, I mean, everyone has their different situations. It's a lot easier to leave if you don't have dependents. It's a lot easier to, make your own choices for yourself.
But once you're in that, that's what everybody struggles with, right? But I think if you're well loved, you can take a lifestyle hit and rebuild. But, oftentimes these people are also in unhealthy relationships.
Add another fun layer. Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
Especially if you have two people who kind of are A types or alphas. Right?
Yeah, I just wrote about that. Like there's huge numbers of lawyers marrying other lawyers, and if not lawyers, then some other, high stress profession.
No, I think it's particularly hard for females too, because it's harder for men. Men are just much more comfortable marrying somebody who's a waitress if they're a lawyer.
Right.
Right. Like, but something like I have 3 daughters. Like I'm not talking out of my ass here, but generally they want to kind of partner across the socioeconomic or up.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas I've told some groups that I've been coaching, I'm like, an electrician can be a wonderful human being.
Yeah.
Who can make a fortune and who's making a difference. Like, but it goes back to what that woman said. Oh, I would never go to a small town and be a lawyer, or I would never have, but then now you've set yourself up. There's almost like there's a very limited number of partners in the category that you want.
Yeah.
And so I think in some cases people partner with people who don't have the right character, but they have the right social status. And it doesn't, you're not supported, or it doesn't lead to the happiness they want.
Well, you're actually very correct. The women who are high earners or professionals do tend to go only, equal
or up,
status or up. So that is much more relevant for them than males.
It's such a different pressure.
It is.
Where you have a
yeah.
guy who's a lawyer and he would just take anybody. Doesn't like in any social, like it's a different numbers game
Yeah,
to
absolutely. You're
meet
right.
somebody
Yeah, yeah,
who,
yeah, yeah.
and even though it might be, actually allows you to fall in love with somebody who might be different than you because you don't insist that they have to be a lawyer or a doctor, a dentist or an accountant. So you can fall in love with somebody who's just a wonderful person, happy doing something else, right? Like that pressure is crazy. What would, do you have any like crazy lawyer stories about people who bucked the trend or success stories or anything like that that could inspire the people listening? Or
I just think anyone who goes out on their own and starts their own practice is like brave and inspirational, especially if they leave big law. I really like appreciate stories where people suffered significant setbacks in their career, like they got fired in some
Yeah.
embarrassing way. These are these are times where you're pushed basically mentally like to the edge, right? Like imagine you're climbing, and you think, oh, I'm like this big Bay Street lawyer or whatever, and you're so proud of it, and that becomes your whole identity, and then you get fired or you get told, you're not making partner, you've got to like go. That to me is like, it's almost something I could call like a trauma. It's not like not necessarily like a death or anything, but it's like a career trauma.
Oh yeah.
And people who can come back from that and build something that's just for them and feel confident and feel good about themselves again after something like that, that to me is always impressive, because it can destroy a lot of people and their confidence.
Especially the personality types that become lawyers because they're used to succeeding.
Of course.
They were the smartest in high school,
Yes.
their undergrad, like it's all this, and all of a sudden you get this setback and you haven't built up the scar tissue to deal with it.
Absolutely. Like, sometimes not getting that job or not getting hired back, whatever it is your first failure in life. You've only been like, succeeding so far.
Yeah, so you've put this huge pressure on yourself. But like when I like advise people who've been through that, I'm like, first of all, you judge people based on how they deal with real adversity.
Yeah.
Everybody is happy when things are going well from them, but like when you get punched in the face, in your workplace or anywhere, you're judged by how you respond to that.
Sure.
So you have to look at it like an opportunity, because all great growth, like for you, you know what I mean? Your decision resulted in you having this cool practice where you actually help lawyers. Like that's spectacular. Right?
Thanks.
But you had to go through that thing. I was at a big firm after I left the prosecution's office and actually got let go because I made a miscalculation. I was friends with the managing partners,
Okay.
but I ignored the majority partners. And so they've resented that I was being called because of this cool military guy. I was going out to dinner with the managing partners all the time, but the other partners hated it.
Okay.
And so in a partnership voting thing, I was voted out. And like I remember two of the managing partners had tears in their eyes, like, I can't believe this happened. Like, what's not supposed to happen? And I remember having, done a lot of stuff in the military, going home and feeling shamed that I had told my wife like this. But then I just reminded, like, I had friends blown up, all this stuff. I started my own business, and often from those setbacks, the greatest growth comes.
Yes.
If you can keep it together, you have a support network and not quit or blame the world for it, right? You just see it as an opportunity to do something magical.
Yeah, but those big setbacks are hard. They're very hard. They stick with you. They do shake your confidence, and you can tell even years later, like sort of the consequence of it if you don't work on it, if you don't actively challenge yourself to say, this wasn't my fault, like this is sort of a situation that happened, it doesn't reflect on me as a capable lawyer. Or
like what I tell people is the universe doesn't owe you anything.
Right.
Like somebody's going to get pancreatic cancer tomorrow and be dead in 2 months.
Yes.
Right? Like keep a perspective. You're in the top 2% of people just being a lawyer.
Yeah.
And if you ended up going to a toxic work environment and you get fired, 2 years from now, you're going to thank whoever your Lord is.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
But it's easy to say because in the moment, all of that kind of indoctrination in law just makes you beat yourself up.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which is why you have to connect with more lawyers
Yeah.
to hear this positive message that this is coming, get ready for it. Start building I think you have a very powerful message. That's why I wanted to bring you onto the podcast. So hopefully some lawyers can hear from somebody who's dealing with the stuff behind closed doors, like what they can do.
Yeah. I mean, it's sort of a brutal industry, really. Just,
No, it's one of the worst industries. I can say this, having been in a lot. Like, but you're not supposed to say it.
I don't want to say it
Like the
because
Law Society doesn't want you to say it.
I want to
like,
be
we're-
positive.
No, but you can't affect change unless we're accurate.
Yeah.
Like what I would say to lawyers is you are in one of the most destructive industries for your mental health you could be in.
Yeah.
And if you don't acknowledge that, you just
Yeah.
keep pretending it's all fine,
Yeah.
right? You're going to go down a path of collapse at some point.
Right.
Now, it's okay to go into like, I joined the military. Somebody joins the military where it's very dangerous. You take on that because you, but there needs to be meaning behind that kind of sacrifice. That's not just monetary. And I think that's what's missing in a lot of firms, you know, is that you actually don't feel unified with a group of people who lift each other up.
Right.
Like I wrote these laws in my firm. One of our laws is we lift each other up, right? There's no room for bullying, right? And success is abundant, right? One person's success doesn't mean you're not that good, but it's hard to build that culture. And I've had lawyers come in and I could just see they're visibly uncomfortable
Yeah.
being treated like a grown adult who doesn't have to be terrified all the time.
Yes.
And they actually go back to it. It's like going back to a bad ex.
Right.
You know, they go back to a big firm because they'd rather have the structure,
Yeah.
right? And I don't think you can fix that really if somebody wants to do it. But
There's something comfortable about hierarchy and structure, knowing what's going to happen, knowing
Yeah.
what you need to do,
yeah, it's
showing
safe.
up every day. Yeah.
Some elements of the law, it sounds good to tell people, but sometimes the job isn't as exciting or as meaningful as it was supposed to be behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't like there's ways to get meaning by actually caring about your clients, going to their house, like, you know, worrying more about them than your peers or your bosses.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a sensitive person. Obviously, I've become a therapist. I actually care about my clients on the files that I had, and it was hard to do that because in law, people actually like will make fun of you if you pretend, like, not pretend to care. If you do care, and actually care, and you think something like, I don't think that settling this case is in their best interest, but you're told that's what we're doing. Do you know what I mean? Like giving advice that goes against how you feel, wanting the best for them, wanting to create value for them and not just charge them money. That's a hard place to be if you're, you know, that kind of person.
No, and that's why law schools need to tell you, this is what the industry is.
Yeah.
It's this level of coldness. Get ready for it. You know what I mean? Because I think good people go into law who are kind and hardworking, and then they weren't really told this was going to happen. Mm-hmm. Isn't that ironic that you can be in a profession where you get made fun of for actually caring about your client? Like,
yeah, I think that we're told time and time again, right, that we're not supposed to get emotionally involved because we have to remain objective, and it's sad in a way. And you know, when you're doing like what I was doing, estate litigation, you're talking about families who are grieving like the loss of a loved one, and then they're suing each other, right? It's like a double trauma.
Yeah.
And I always felt for these families, and you know, so it's something interesting in law. You're not allowed to care, like, that's silly.
Yeah. Like what I would say to somebody who's in that situation today is you have to offset that by providing, you know, equal knowledge to families before they're in that situation.
Yeah.
Right? You kind of have to transfer that. These families are going through this because they didn't have a proper will, or they didn't have the conversation they should have had, or they, you know, they villainize each other. So I would try to offset that by having a lawyer who's in that situation, making social content or articles trying to get people to avoid it, so that you at least feel like so when you're here, you at least feel like you've done something to stop that.
Right.
But like, there's many times where I've sat in courtrooms thinking, I want to stop this being a lawyer because I care so much about the verdict that I'm like, you actually have to be kind of disassociated in a way to do it all the time.
Yeah.
Like even when I stopped being a prosecutor, I was doing criminal trials, like where I believed my guy or girl was innocent. Like the emotional weight I carried if I wasn't successful. And I just saw other people who didn't seem to give a shit. Like they were just up next. And I'm like, I can't become that person. Like it wears on you over time.
Yeah, well, that's a particularly difficult area, right? Where you're actually dealing with people's lives and freedoms. And
Yeah.
so that would be a hard one.
And even in personal injury, but it's like the whole bench, it seems so, I don't know if dispassionate is a word, but they just kind of sit there and you pronounce kind of a judgment, and it has far-reaching implications, but it's like, is this the coldness of that? But it is a battlefield when you go, and I don't think people do a good job also of telling law students the different cultures and different practice areas. Like, where do you learn that in law school?
Nowhere, I think. And I think we just end up, like, we just kind of get filtered into these areas, and it doesn't make any sense. Like, we don't, I remember in law school, people talking about, I want to be real estate, I want to do commercial real estate. I don't know where they get the idea, but, you know, this, and then teachers or whoever saying, like, yeah, whatever, you're going to end up where you end up. Like, don't even think about that. That's silly. Like, it's silly to choose a practice area when you're in, you know, first year, second year.
See, that's a disservice to the students, right? Like, it's silly to choose a practice area just because that's
you're just going to end up where we put you.
That's showing you that we're just manufacturing, you know, mercenaries to go wherever you get your job, as opposed to in first year taking the time to really think about where you want to go, how you can make a difference, what is the type of lifestyle you want.
Right.
Because the area of practice, it can be reflective of the lifestyle.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
But nobody talks about that.
Yeah.
Right? So I am going to look for some products from Moira Kirk. Cook on some of these topics. Dr. Kirk is a doctor next door that's why I think that popped into my head, who I was chatting with. And maybe, you know, I can have like a module in one of your things about keeping perspective when things are hot. But I think I would love to see you do something like that helps get more access to people before they need the help. I think it's good for your business later, but you also make a lot of change if somebody can speak to these students before they get fully indoctrinated into the system.
Yes, and I love working with young people. That they're wonderful clients.
But there's a lot of YouTube channels. Like, I don't know if you know, like, I also have a marketing and branding company.
Yeah.
And you need to start, my humble opinion.
Yes, I'll take it.
You're a shy, humble, good human, I can tell, but you need to start talking to lawyers online. You could say 2-minute talk for lawyers who are struggling.
Okay.
And just put like a little post on that. And if you just do that like 2-3 times a week, the algorithm will find the lawyers who are depressed, because the algorithm is brilliant at knowing what your profession is and seeing what your eyes linger on, and it'll start putting your content in front of them.
Yeah.
And then 2 years of doing that, you're going to have the biggest following of law students and lawyers looking for your insights. And I think that's a way you can really affect some amazing change.
I have to look into the ethics of putting people on. I guess they can't be real clients or something.
No,
I don't know.
You're not putting people on. Like we've worked with some clinicians where they have a camera while the clinician is doing the consult, but you don't see the person because people just want to see the consult, right? Like you can do that as long as you're talking either hypothetically or anonymously. But if your goal is to help people avoid mental health trauma, again, don't be scared of the college. Like, ask for forgiveness, not permission. As long as you're not sharing their name and their issues, I think you're 100% fine. And I can be your unofficial legal advisor if you need it.
Thank you for all this business help. That's great.
So, Moira, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you to seek your services, what would be the best way to do that?
I have a website, cookcounseling.ca. And
do we spell counseling
with 2 L's?
2 L's.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm on LinkedIn.
You're on LinkedIn. Moira Kirk on
Moira
LinkedIn.
Cook.
That's how I found you.
Yeah.
Talking about some issues. All I can say to the audience out there, if you're a lawyer, don't be scared to stand up for what you believe in. Don't be scared to rock the boat. Surround yourself with amazing human beings and fight the good fight, because don't give your soul away to a big firm. You'll just regret it 20 years down the road.
Right. I mean, some people are made out for big firms, but some are not. And know where you belong. Know where you're.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.